What is up, everybody? VanBradley here with a brand new Civ 7 update. If you take a look at the 1.2.5 update notes, they just go on and on and on and on, which means we might be here for a while. Yesterday, I put out a video previewing this patch, said I loved a lot of the map stuff, a lot of the UI stuff, but I didn't really love their approach to balancing the game. And people in the comments were like, hey, VanBradley, you're actually an idiot because their approach to balancing the game is great. So, proof might be in the pudding, but we are going to deep dive into the update 1.2.5 notes coming out today. We are starting out with new map types and improved map generation. A very welcome change to Civ 7. I think we can all agree the maps were a little bit lame and boring and repetitive and just not very engaging on a game by game basis. We got Pangaea Plus, which looks awesome. Pangaean Islands. This one looks like my favorite so far. Continents and Islands, just some very awesome, cool new continent shapes, and Continents Plus as well. I still have some questions about how they're going to do the distant lands and some of the Pangaea Plus and Pangaea and Islands and whatnot. It kind of seems like a mechanic that is based around having kind of big continent splits, like we can see here with Continents and Islands. But otherwise, without diving too deep into it, all of these are very welcome changes to the game. A plus to the team at Firaxis. It says here as well that these maps are kind of the first step in a series of map improvements, and in a later update, they're going to target biomes as well as more map types. Again, all very welcome stuff, but I think this kind of takes on the biggest challenge people were having with the maps. I haven't really struggled with the resource layout or the biomes or the navigable rivers or anything like that. It really has just been the variety of the maps, so I think this is a really, really good change. Next up, we have our UI improvements. Another change I'm sure a lot of people are really excited about. These ones kind of focus mostly on building within your cities. There's a lot of UI elements. I'm sure we'd all love to get an upgrade and a pass, and I'm sure we'll get there, but this is a very, very good start in an area of the game I think is most needing a UI update. Part of what the update is trying to do is kind of give you more information while you are building within your cities to make your choices feel more meaningful, which I think, based on what they've shown us here, is very successful. If you take a look at the stonecutter here, it just says +5, or the bazaar says +9, but you're not really sure how you're getting that. You're not really interacting with the mechanics of the game to get to these numbers. So you're kind of just clicking on big number cause good. If you come down here though, all of these are still the same, but it has the bazaar at +5, and then 4 of that 9 is the adjacency, so you can better understand where that extra 4 is coming from. Same with the stonecutter, 3 of that is the base yield, 2 of that is coming from its warehouse bonus, so you'll be able to better understand what you're placing when you're placing it. The tooltips here are a lot better as well, which is just obviously great. Better tooltips, more information feels good when you're playing a game of Civ. The addition of diplomatic and expansionist city states is really, really interesting. I'm happy they're here. This feels like a good change. I think having more different types of city states is really interesting. What I will say though is in Civ 6, what I liked most about the city states is not the type that they were. They could be culture, they could be science, they could be gold. It's the specific effects that that unique city state gave me. So I'm more concerned about how the effects of the city state are engaging with the game. So we'll see how we do in these patch notes here, but overall happy to have more different types of city states, more different types of bonuses to choose from. This is especially true because diplomatic and expansionist kind of strategies are a big part of a lot of Civ leader builds. They're a big part of the attribute trees. Like, these are big parts of the game, and getting their own city states is a lovely quality of life touch. Based on what they've wrote here, they're going to fit in really well. A diplomatic city-state provides new options centered around happiness and diplomatic actions. That obviously makes sense, but is really, really good. Some more diplo options are great because, like, playing a diplomacy-focused game is really fun and really engaging, so that should be interesting. An expansionist city-state providing options on food and the expansion of your empire is also really great. You can see yourself building a strategy around some expansionist city-states for both tall and wide gameplay, so that's awesome. Now, we're going to spend lots of time going over a variety of things, I'm sure, but we're here at the Strategic Balance Pass, the place in which me and you both disagreed the most yesterday. Now, before we get into the notes, I want to clear up my opinion on the balancing. I have no real opinion on the specific things that they're balancing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if this boost is a flat thing or a percentage thing or whatever. That doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is how they're approaching the balance of a game in general. I find that in gaming, not just Civ, but in other games, in other categories, and other genres, a lot of game developers go through their games and they find the most powerful things, the most fun, powerful things to do, and they nerf them because they're too powerful. This makes sense if what you're looking for is balance. You kind of take the most powerful things and rein them in a little bit so they're more balanced, right? And then they go through and they find the least performing things. And they don't really buff them until they're exciting or fun or engaging. They kind of just buff them till they're not actively bad. And because you've pulled all of the most fun things down from the top kind of towards the middle, and you've pulled all the bottom things from the bottom kind of just towards this like weird zone, none of the game feels that fun because every choice just kind of, I don't know, like you just end up with a bunch of like middle options that are not that exciting. A good example is the pantheons in Civ 6, actually. Depending on the game, you might get a powerful one still. It used to have Earth Goddess, which is very powerful, very exciting. Every time you chose it, it felt like a real kind of staple of your game. After they nerfed Earth Goddess and brought it back towards the middle, the whole process of picking a pantheon kind of just felt less exciting because you were like, oh, none of these are like that helpful anymore. So it kind of doesn't matter which one I pick. I'm just going to pick one that seems interesting, right? And sometimes it made a difference and sometimes it didn't, but it was kind of like, it just kind of took that whole part of the game that used to be really fun because one of the options was powerful. And they were like, I don't know. So I'm just worried that when we go through the strategic balance pass, I'm not concerned about the things individually they're balancing. Those things all made sense. I'm concerned that when you take all of the most powerful things, bring them towards the middle, and don't do enough work in the middle and at the bottom to make new things more interesting, you just end up with like a jumbled mess of mediocrity instead of anything that's like fun to sink your teeth into. With that being said, they provided a list here of kind of their approach, what they're looking at when they're going into these balance changes. So let's give it a read and see how we feel. Many of the best options for maximizing yields are off map. That is a true statement. Based on passive bonuses from attributes, this is mostly where this is coming from for sure, city-states, and empire resources. Many of these bonuses are stacking percentages available to all civs, which diminishes the value of leader and civ abilities in comparison. I agree with this to an extent, and I feel like when playing Civ 7, a lot of people, when talking about the game, actually forget what Civ 6 was like. So they're talking about a lot of the best options for maximizing your yields being off map, but that's pretty true of Civ 6 as well. Like if I think about how to maximize my yields in Civ 6, a lot of them were kind of building wonders with percentage bonuses. Now you might think, but those are on the map, but it's like so are empire resources. Like they don't just appear, like they're on the map. You have to go and same, you have to go and build a wonder. Same with city states, you have to like go and Susa. The city state is on the map. So same with Civ 6. If you're playing on deity, one of the best ways to win a kind of a science and culture victory is to get to the end of the culture tree so you can get the 15% percentage yield boost. And I just don't know if I fully agree with, like, yes, they're off map, but you still need to do things on the map to get them. Like I just don't understand that this, like, I don't understand this part specifically, right? It's like from attributes, but you're still doing quests and like doing things a lot of the time on the map to get those attribute points. A lot of my attribute points I get from building wonders, which is on the map. City states, like, I'm spending my influence that I earned in the game to a city state that is on the map to get a I don't know. I just don't know if I'm fully subscribed to like this version of that yield maximization has to happen like on map as opposed to off map via things that are on the map. That seems weird to me. However, where I do agree and where I'm really kind of with them is that the leader and civ abilities, when it comes to maximizing your yields, do not feel good enough. Like, I think that's a completely fair way to approach balancing the game. I think if you're going into the game saying, hey, we want our leader and civ abilities to kind of be the base by which the empires kind of scale and snowball, and if you are going to be able to abuse anything, we want it to be the leader and civ that you're playing. That is a very fun way to engage with civ, right? So if they go through and the leader and civ abilities really make that difference and really feel unique and cool and exciting, then this approach broadly makes sense to me. What I'm worried about, though, is they kind of nerf all of this stuff. They don't really buff all of this stuff, and then it just kind of feels weird in the middle. In any case, I'm with them on the fact that the leader and civ abilities do not feel as valuable or valuable enough when it comes to composing the entirety of your empire, and that's a great place for them to go with balance. I am really confused with this like off-map stuff, because that, I don't know, it just kind of all happens via things that are on the, whatever. It's often easy to build every available building in an age. While not inherently a problem, this reduces strategic decision making. Players are choosing when to build, not what to build. Building value also diminishes as yields climb, making them even less interesting decision points. Now, I fully agree with them here. I think the way buildings interact with your empire in Civ 7 is not overly interesting or exciting. You are able to kind of just build every available building in an age. So I'm super happy to see them kind of taking a look at how we take the yield economy and move it more towards kind of strategic building placement. This is a really good one too. If what they're saying is, "Hey, we're not a fan of a lot of these off-map yield stacking," right? We're going to move a lot of that into strategic building placement. Then that's an approach to balancing that I obviously subscribe to. We'll see how it works out, but I think that this a really good kind of approach to the buildings. It's usually optimal to play with as many cities as possible. Converting a new city has an upfront cost but requires little strategic consideration. While we want to support wide play styles, the effectiveness gap between wide and tall play, fewer cities, more towns, was too large. I can get behind this. I think that makes sense to me. I think that wide was far better than tall. However, I've played some tall games and not had too many issues, probably because of all the percentage stacking bonuses. So we'll see. Yeah, I think that this is a good approach to balance. I think you want to have wide play styles and tall play styles both be effective, and I think you want them to be effective depending on what leader you are. If you are a leader that needs to be kind of at war and taking cities to get your bonuses, you want to be able to use the abilities of that leader to have a wide play style. If you're someone who is kind of focused on cities being close together, having more like yields in towns and those kinds of things, you want to make sure those tall play styles are supported as well. So yeah, this is great. The gold economy rarely challenges the player. New towns provide large amounts of gold and pay for themselves quickly, while maintenance costs like unit upkeep do not often make more than a small dent in finances. Yeah, this is crazy. I think I'm less concerned about the yield scaling. Like I don't have a huge problem with that. I do have a huge problem with the gold economy though. The gold economy in Civ 7 is absolutely whacked out of your mind. So I'm glad that they're taking a look at this. All right, so what's changing? Off-map yields and stacking. I still whatever. We reviewed the entire game and removed almost every stacking percentage bonus. Leaders and civs retain their bonuses to increase their strategic impact. Where possible, we replace percentages with numerical bonuses that are still meaningful but don't snowball uncontrollably. When you snowball, it should be because of smart decisions, not repeated 3% bonuses. Now, I am once again going to argue that those 3% bonuses don't just happen. You still have to make smart choices to identify that this is powerful and then to go and get that 3% bonus. You still need to set up your game to make sure you get the diplomatic points to go down that tree. You still need to build the wonders that give you those points to go down that tree. You still need to actually do the work in the modern age of maintaining several alliances to I just think it's yes, these are powerful, and yes, they need to be nerfed, and yes, if what they're doing is moving a lot of this stuff into civ and leader and buildings and those type of strategic choices, amazing. We're all for that. However, it feels really reductive to just say, if you use percentage stacking bonuses, you're not smart. You're not like even with gold, the resource, we get the 20% bonus to the buildings. It's like, yeah, that resource is there and it's very powerful and it needs to be nerfed. We can all agree on that. You still have to go and get it. You still have to like go with your settler and put a town next to some gold and then acquire that gold. And then you got to take your merchants and search around the trade routes and find another civ that's going to give you more gold because that like you still have to pursue that strategy. It's not simply that this thing exists, therefore it's automatically busted and right like there still is a strategic aspect to going and using these things, and so I think it is a little reductive to just say if you snowball because of stacking bonuses, that was not smart or strategic at all. That's just yeah, it's like but it was in a way. I don't know. I'm happy. It seems like they're moving the balance into the right areas. So I'm going to leave this patch notes, I assume, pretty happy. However, this feels like a reductive view of how Civ is played. They've made a number of changes to social policies, resources, city state effects, tech costs, all that good stuff, and they're going to keep looking to balance the game. They updated Napoleon, which I think is so funny because it's the one that you get for like having a 2K account. And I really enjoy that. Like, there's a lot of leaders that need some TLC, right? Like, there's a lot of leaders that are just like fine, but not amazing. And they're like, no, 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 no. We're gonna do the one with the 2K account. Now, to be fair, Napoleon did need some love, so that's great. I just find that really funny. Oh my god, we're just now getting to the update notes. So now that we're at the update notes, just so that these go on forever and ever and ever, I'm just going to stop to highlight things I think are interesting. So I've just taken a look through the new city state types, and I'm broadly really happy. Like, these diplomatic city states and the expansionist city states seem to give some cool bonuses that are interesting in antiquity, exploration, and modern. Something like send delegation is just a fun way to play the game. When supported, civs gain 8 happiness per turn, and you gain vision of each other's capitals. That's pretty interesting. Like, that's something that's fun. It's a little exciting. It gives you something to spend your influence on. So why not? We have these like these improvements that gain influence and happiness, but double their yields during celebration. Again, fun, interesting, a little different. Happy to have the Diplo city states around. Receive a settler in your capital, settlement limit, food on warehouse buildings. Like, this is all good stuff. Food in settlements for each expansionist city state you're suzerain of. We can get behind all this. These settlement limit ones can be quite powerful too. Like, I can see building a whole strategy around getting and stacking some of these settlement limit ones. Now, there are a lot of kind of city state changes here that I'm not going to be able to go through just because it would take forever. Just note that they are taking a lot of the percentage bonuses as discussed and making them flat bonuses. Another thing they're doing that I find really interesting is they're making the bonuses relate to the type of city state you've suzerained instead of suzing as many city states as possible, which I think makes sense in concept, but I don't know if that'll actually feel good to play. For instance, something like this here, Arch Antiquity, 5% production towards wonders for every cultural city state you're a suzerain of. Previously, that might have been like plus 5% towards wonders for every city state you're suzerain of. Now, it makes sense thematically to have it be based on the type of civ, that if you want this boost again, you're going to have to choose another cultural city state because this is a cultural boost. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. I think, though, the issue is the way the city states get laid out in the game. I often find myself kind of not running into, like, I feel like the distribution of the types of city states is very, very strange game in and game out. And then the addition of 2 new city states, the expansionist and diplomatic one, is going to add more city. Like, what is the likelihood? Right, so you want to do a cultural game. You have some cultural city states. You want to stack a couple of these cultural only. But what is the likelihood you're going to have like 2 to 4 cultural city states that are able to be the SUSed so you can do, like, I think this is a good idea in concept. I think the way the city states and the independent powers get placed around the map and selected, especially with 2 new ones, makes this a little bit wonky. Yeah, you can see they've done a similar thing here. Plus 5% gold for every city state you're the suzerain of. So a percentage bonus that was for every city state is now a flat bonus just for economic city states, which is, it is what it is. I still, like, it's just way worse. So we'll have to see if that being way worse is good or not. But it's more like, how many economic city states are there going to be in your game, right? Like, if you decided, okay, I want to get a lot of trade routes, I want to get this ability here for every economic city state I'm suzerain of, so I'm going to go find more economic city states. Just how many of those are there going to be? I have some concerns about the distribution, but otherwise, I think it thematically, if not for nothing, makes sense to have these bonuses be tied to the type of city state instead of just any city state. We now have the patch notes for the strategic balance pass. Rebalance attribute trees, they're kind of just reiterating here that stacking these attribute tree bonuses were the biggest culprit behind ballooning yields in the later game. So all direct percentage bonuses to yields have been removed from the attribute tree and replaced with reasonable, but still powerful, static bonuses. Yeah, I find this kind of things too. I guess we're just going to have to play it because, like, it says reasonable, but still powerful. And now what I do agree with is that a lot of this stuff, what you want to do is stack a bunch of small, smart bonuses over time to create a large, impressive empire, right? So 10% culture in cities with at least 1 wonder, that's insane. We could all agree that needs to be nerfed and changed. So that's fine, right? Plus 5 culture per age in cities with at least 1 wonder. So that's like roughly, if everything goes well, it's like 20 culture in antiquity, right? And then you have maybe 6 cities with a wonder in exploration, so it's 60 culture. And then in modern, you're looking at maybe 8 with a wonder. So what would that be? 8 by 15, 100 maybe? What is that? Somewhere just over 100 culture, whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, it feels less good for sure, but I suppose that's powerful enough. This feels terrible though. Like, congratulations, you got to the end. Like, I get why you can't have the most powerful bonus of all time at the end of these trees. Sure, I get it. Taking the 5% total culture repeatable, I get why that's got to go. 5 culture per age repeatable is like, so this isn't relevant for the first 2 ages. Like, you're not typically maxing this out until late exploration, early modern, right? So let's talk about the modern age here. 15 culture per, like, you would need to put like 8 into the repeatable for that to be like super meaningful. I think that I feel like this here, this kind of change hits the mark in a way where I can completely get on board with the way they're trying to balance it, right? 5 culture per age in cities with a wonder. It has a strategic element. The yields are like good enough to be worth it. You're going down the culture tree. It's kind of free extra culture. This feels, this feels like what they're advertising right here, which is we're taking something and replacing it with something less good, but still like powerful and strategic. So I'm on board with that way of balancing it, right? Same with this kind of one here. But the end of the node being like, this just feels terrible. And to be fair to them, a little bit, and this is maybe a change from the thumbnail I put out yesterday, I feel like the diplomatic tree kind of at least does what is advertised, which is the percentage yield gone, biggest offender, redesigned completely, whatever. 3 influence per age and 5 happiness per age repeatable. The extra 15 happiness per thing in the modern age is not nothing, right? Like, that's very, very helpful. So that's good. But I think 9 influence per time you click into it is like pretty good in the modern age. Like, it's not as good, obviously, biggest offender, but it's powerful enough to be interesting, I suppose. But it's way better than like, this just feels terrible. Yeah, the economic one is also trash. 5 gold per age repeatable, like 15 gold per turn in the modern age. Like, that's like, you got to the end. Congratulate this. Yeah, I'm not in on this. Yeah, I think I really get the vision with most of these changes. I don't get the vision at all with the end of the tree repeatable ones being so bad. Is it because they're repeatable that they're bad? Right? The idea being you're just going to have a bunch of them. I don't know. Yeah, maybe they need to be bad because they're repeatable, but then why make them repeatable? Why not just convert it to a wild card? I don't know. Yeah, maybe that's a bad solution as well. I feel like this is missing the mark, and we'll have to play it, but I feel like making the end of the tree bad just because it's repeatable isn't satisfying, right? Like, I want to get to the end and feel this. I want to get to the end and feel something. Like, I got to the end of the tree, this feels amazing. Not, I got to the end of the tree, and I'm so glad I get to repeatedly stack a shitty bonus. Right? Like, even if you end up in a place that is, you tech into this 8 times, so you end up in a place where this feels good. Just the idea, it's like, yes, I got to the end of the tree, and now I get to stack a shitty bonus over and over again, instead of, whoa, I got to the end of the tree and this is really powerful. Good thing I strategically kind of got to the end of this tree. I think they missed the mark on this. So there are a lot of building notes here, but I think they completely hit the mark with a lot of this building stuff. Again, you have to play it to really know, but everything they're saying about the buildings makes perfect sense to me, and I think will make the game significantly better. Adding a building cost mechanic for each kind of non-warehouse building in the settlement makes perfect sense. This is kind of their way of doing it in like Civ 6, where you had to have a certain population to unlock the next district. Every time you build a building in your settlement, the next building in that settlement will go up by 5%. Additionally, for every other city that you have, the cost to purchase buildings is up by 10%. Right? So it kind of, puts a cap on the amount of cities you can have, or else the buildings just become so expensive. So I find this really, really good. There's a lot of strategy here. This is kind of, I think, the perfect numbers to make this interesting. How many buildings do you want in your settlements? Because they get more expensive. So you have to like really think about the buildings you're putting down, right? And then how many cities do you want to put those buildings in? Because they make it more expensive as well. Especially because the new cities theoretically can gain way more yields than a town. So this kind of offsets that. that a little bit. It balances the wide and tall play styles. They've also gone through, I'm not going to go through each and every one here. They've gone through and made the base buildings a little bit better in terms of their yield type to kind of make up for that as well. So not only is the decision more strategic, like, okay, I'm only going to put down 3 or 4 buildings right now. What are they going to be? Those buildings have more of an oomph, more of an impact because of their increased kind of base yields. So I'm 100% on board with these building changes. They took a look at unit maintenance as well. Again, it's one of those things you have to kind of play to feel out. I wonder if the increased unit maintenance with the fact that you have less kind of runaway gold multipliers makes how does that make this feel? But broadly, I'm super supportive of this. I think it's really, really easy in the late game of Civ 7 to just have a giant army and not even notice how much they're costing with regard to their unit maintenance. And so I think the best way to do this is to kind of, up the maintenance of the units and then have ways to reduce it via policy cards or via, Civ or leader abilities. But this feels like it's hitting the right mark. This is scaling in a way that makes perfect sense. You're kind of starting at 0. The bomber, tier 2 bombers kind of cost 15 gold per turn, which doesn't seem that if you just told me without context, hey, the bombers are going to cost 15 gold per turn, I'd say, yeah, that feels exactly right. So I think that this is a really good change here. They've rebalanced towns to not have a base production yield, presumably, so that the gold they generate is a little bit lower. I don't know how I feel about this, but hey, we'll try it. Like, it doesn't affect me that much, I don't think. And then when you upgrade them to a city, they'll gain that production on the kind of city center back. So yeah, that makes sense as like a way to reduce the amount of gold flowing through the game. So yeah, this makes sense to me. They tweaked some social policies as part of the balance pass. The big news here is that they feel like some need a significant change or a full redesign, and they will make those changes in the future. So these are not going to be big changes. These are going to be smaller changes to some of the social policies to account for all of the other balancing they've done. I think changes like this make perfect sense and feel really good. 20% production towards culture buildings or science buildings is going to give you something to work towards. It's going to feel a lot better when you have more expensive buildings, kind of the rest of the changes kind of coming in here. So these kind of policies are going to feel better as a result. Getting extra culture and science on culture and science buildings. I think that this kind of thing makes perfect sense and feels really good. I do find it so interesting, though, that it's like we hate off-map percentage bonuses, but also we're going to put percentage bonuses in all of the policy cards, which are definitely not remotely on the map. Like, I find the whole off-map, on-map thing very, very strange, because none of this is happening on the 30% production towards cavalry units. That ain't happening on a map, right? You unlock that in the culture tree and then put it in the policy cards, right? So I'm broadly supportive of everything they're doing here. All of these new cards feel fine, look good, seem like they'll be, good additions when you account for the rest of the balancing. I'm just so confused with their approach to this. They even say here, we're hesitant to change resources as they reflect the type of on-map bonus that we think is healthy. However, a handful of Empire resources are having too much of an impact. I totally agree, but again, these are percentage bonuses. I guess they're not stackable, which is part of it, right? This is just one bonus. We're not stacking them, but they're not happening on the map at all. Yeah, completely agree that gold and silver were the biggest offenders. I still take a little umbrage with the strategy aspect of it, that you still had to seek it out, but agree that they're way more powerful than any other option. So let's take a look at what they've done. +1 gold and happiness in all settlements. Obviously, that's way worse. I wonder if you could have just had smaller percentages, right? Because I liked the idea that my resources were making it cheaper to purchase buildings. Like, that made sense to me, that I acquired a bunch of gold, so things were a little bit cheaper. But I guess you're earning the gold on the other end. So let's say antiquity, if you're kind of maxing out, 8 gold, 8 happiness. I mean, that doesn't feel very good. But I guess if you're getting a couple of gold resources, you're still getting... So what is that modern age? You got like 22, 23 settlements. So 23 gold and 23 happiness. You get 2 or 3 of those. 46 gold, 46 happiness. This is where it kind of just feels mid. this is what I was talking about. It's fine. It's good. You'd rather have the gold and happiness than not. It's certainly not bad, but it certainly doesn't feel amazing. However, I think this puts it in line with the other resources. Like, I think that that's a fair change to say that this puts it in line with, like, the, 6 production and 8 production if it's on a distant land city, or those other resources of a similar nature. So I think they're just taking gold and silver and making them as balanced as the other resources, which is fair enough. Although I'd argue that makes them a little bit mid, but this makes sense to me. I think the food in all elements is really great as well. Like I think getting silver, golden food will feel okay. So you know what? I'm getting on board with this approach to balancing, although it still feels a little wonky to me. Yeah, 2 happiness in the capital, +5 culture win in a celebration. This 10% culture win in a celebration was absolutely whack. So, you're trading, you got, 4 or 5 wine resources. That'll be 25 culture. I mean, this is bad then. It's 25 culture in the modern age when you're in a celebration is it's pretty freaking bad. I think they might have gone too far with the wine. I don't know if this is very good. However, I think it might just put it back in line with the other resources though. Like maybe they're just hoping all the resources have a broadly similar power curve. Yeah, interesting that they nerfed them, but they kept the percentage bonuses when they're not stacking at the empire level, when they're just like individual resources that I suppose you can still stack at the city level, which makes sense though, because just much smaller pool that you're stacking from than the whole empire. But you have jade here, 10% gold instead of 15, hardwood 10% instead of 20. I mean, we'll just see. I think that this makes sense. Like if you're going into a patch trying to get rid of percentage bonuses that can stack out of control, these two make sense. They've made some changes to victory pacing to account for all of this stuff, which makes sense. They have decreased explorer movement from 3 to 2. I haven't done any of these super fast rushed culture victories, but evidently they are a thing that people are doing. So, I mean, sure, that makes sense. Explorers are really expensive, though. I think that's the idea, though, is because they're expensive, you should need to get a couple of them, pretty early on if you want to speed run it. And then that should have like a bigger cost because they can't move as far. So that makes sense to me. Scientific victory, the tech costs have been reduced. Interesting. So, getting to a science victory took a little while. So they've reduced a lot of these or science needed to go through the text, which is interesting. Some of these are pretty meaningful changes, like almost 1,000 science off nuclear fission. This is going to save you maybe 20 turns overall, 25 turns overall. When you're going through a whole science tree, that's really not that bad in the modern age. This feels significant. This is nice. They've also decreased the cost of the factory, rail station, and port buildings. I can agree with that. They were a little bit expensive, but this is a real buff to the scientific aspect of the game. Like, this is a real meaningful buff to the science victory here. This should be a little more fun and intuitive to go for now. Super happy with these changes overall. This makes perfect sense to me. This is great. We got some really interesting AI changes. They're pretty small, though, like no large AI. Maybe they should have taught the AI how to stack the percentage bonuses, and maybe their yields would have also scaled out of control. The AI gives greater weighting to population of offered cities, and peace deal is cool. This one's funny. The AI will no longer pick the first available pantheon. That feels like it explains a few things, that the AI was also just picking the first available pantheon instead of the best one. Overall, some small changes to the AI. Will it make them better? Probably, but you probably won't notice it too much when you're playing. There's some economy changes here, some things that weren't working as intended. Like city parks no longer stack their +1 happiness to vegetated tiles bonus when built in different settlements. So that seems like it was affecting settlements it shouldn't have affected, which is interesting. It feels like some of these are just straight up a nerf. Like the farm will no longer receive 2 food when placing the warehouse building grosser. Like it feels like that's just a nerf. I'm not sure if that was working as intended or not. So some small tweaks to some things here, but nothing huge, nothing crazy. We have some bug fixes for the military stuff, which is great. Love the move by rail changes. Naval focus fire working now is awesome. If you watch our Catherine the Great game, these were all problems we ran into. So happy to have a lot of these bugs fixed. Evidently, the Abbasids were a little too strong, so they're getting a bit of a nerf. All right, fair enough. We have the buff Napoleons. We got some bug fixes for Catherine the Great, or not bug fixes, but buildings with great work slots gain an additional slot. It also affects wonders now, which is good. So mostly you have the advertised Napoleon buffs, which, whatever, I'm not a big Napoleon fan, but they are meaningful buffs. They should make Napoleon a little more fun to play. Some Catherine the Great stuff, and then the Abbasids got a little bit of a nerf. Evidently, they were too strong. Now, there are quite a few UI changes here. We talked about most of them. You got the new yield indicators, which are amazing. You have the building slot icons, the specialist slot icons, all of that we talked about in the video yesterday. They didn't show too many pictures here, but some great UI changes, and then a whole host of like smaller things. None of this really stood out to me as, very specifically amazing, but all improvements, all bug fixes, all things that were happier in the game, because making the UI better is awesome. And finally, we have the Right to Rule collection coming out. We have more things to build, more leaders and civs to play. We can take a look at all these maybe in another video, but it's just worth noting for now that the Right to Rule collection part 2 is available. So if you're playing Civ 7 and you have the Super Uber Deluxe Edition, or you bought the Right to Rule collection or whatever, you will have that content available to play today. And that will be it for this patch breakdown today. Broadly, I'm happier than I was yesterday. The things I knew I was going to like about this patch, I liked just as much reading the notes. The things I didn't think I would like, some of them I still don't like, but I like them better than I thought I would. So overall, I think this is a positive improvement for Civ 7, especially the map and the UI changes. I think those are amazing. I think with a lot of the balancing, I think that the approach to it is broadly good, having read the notes. However, I still have a few concerns about making things feel fun and exciting. However, I think that the changes are positive, especially because they did go through and they did buff some of the strategies. They buffed the science victory in the late game, the economic victory. Ports and factories and everything are getting a little bit cheaper. So I think that they're working through it. We'll see what happens in the next patch. But I can be broadly supportive of what's going on in this patch 1.2.5. Which is awesome. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in your Civ 7 games on patch 1.2.5. See you in the next one.